Good evening. I'm hereby calling this meeting of council committees to order. The date is December 6th, 2021. Just to let everybody know, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. You are being recorded. We are being live streamed for the public record. Mr. Harris, would you please begin with a roll call of members?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo.
Here.
Ms. Beke.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Here.
Mr. Soto.
Here.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Thank you. We move then to the approval of the November 1st, 2021 committee meeting minutes. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council comments on the minutes. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
Mr. Soto.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. That brings us to our first committee, which is personnel. Councilor Diaz.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, if we can leave all the praises till after committee, so we can get through these, since we have a lot to do today. The first nomination is for John Reed for reappointment of the City Revitalization and Improvement Zone Authority. And I do not know if he wants to address us, if he's here or not.
No.
Okay, then we can, if no one has any questions on the panel, I would go ahead and move this to our next meeting, which is next Tuesday. And I don't recall what date it is.
The
That would
14th,
be the 14th.
December 14th.
Motion?
Motion to send this to full council on the 14th.
Second.
Thank you. The next nomination is for Daniel Falcone for appointment of the City Revitalization and Improvement Zone Authority. Is Mr. Falcone here? No? So we'll go ahead then and move this forward. So I make a motion.
Motion to move this agenda item to full council on the 14th.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a nomination for Ronald Ashby for the reappointment of the noise control. Is he available? Would he like to address? Would you like to? No? Okay. If no one has any other questions, I'd like to then go ahead and make a motion to move this to full council on the 14th.
Motion to move this reappointment to full council November 14th.
Second.
Thank you. The next nomination is Scott Gardner for reappointment of the Noise Control Board.
Motion to move this nomination to full council on the 14th.
Second.
Thank you. Nomination then will go to Michael, I guess it's Sprunger, for reappointment of the Housing Authority. So I'd like to make a motion and go ahead and move this to full council if there's no other questions on the 14th.
So moved.
Second.
And the next nomination is for Miss Louise Williams for appointment of the Human Relations Commission. Miss Louise, would you like to speak? I'm so honored you're here, Your Honor. I'll go ahead then and make a motion to move this to full council on the 14th.
So moved.
And then we'll go to the next nomination, which is Kendra Sanders to the appointment of the Higher Education Authority. Would you like to speak? No, that's okay. Okay, well, thank you so much. So if, I'd like to go ahead and move this then to our next meeting on the 14th.
Second.
And let's see, the next one is a nomination for Kirk Strauss for the appointment of the Historical Agricultural Review Board. Is he available? Would you like to address City Council? No? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move this then to full council on the 14th if there's no questions.
So moved.
And we have a nomination for Nicholas, and I'm going to botch this one up, Stauffer, for appointment of the Planning Commission. And I gather that he's not available today.
Okay.
So I go ahead then, and we'll make a motion to move this to full council on the 14th.
Second.
Thank you. Next nomination is Tony Dastra for an appointment as an alternate for the Planning Commission. So Dastra, would you like to address City Council at all?
I'll wait till next Tuesday. I feel like I'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Dastra. So we'll go ahead and make this motion to move this to full council then on the 14th.
Second.
And then we do have a resolution, which is 62, 2021. It's an appointments for Christopher Aviles of the Zoning Hearing Board. Would you like to come up and say a few words to council?
Come up.
You can, come on up.
Por favor. Es importante.
Hello. So I'm Chris. I was born and raised in Lancaster, and I was nominated to this board by Douglas Smith. So being born and raised here, I feel like I have a good feel of the city, and I think my voice would be beneficial in the zoning board.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I think it's really important to have a diversity, and you bring a lot of diversity all in one person. So thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and move this to full council then on the 14th.
So moved.
The next is Resolution 63, 2021, and another appointment with Michaela Alwyn for the Zoning Hearing Board. Would you like to address us?
Hello, thanks for having me. I came in front of you a few months ago for Planning Commission, but hoping to transfer over to the Zoning Hearing Board. While I'm not from here, I've been here about 6-7 years, and I have a pretty long history of working in housing, affordable housing creation, community development, really on a community level, not so much, well, really across all the boards, from working in the community to now I work for the County Redevelopment Authority, overseeing most of the multifamily affordable housing creation. So I'm really excited for this opportunity, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and move this then to full council for the 14th.
So moved.
Second.
And painlessly, our last one is Resolution 64, 2021, appointing Whitney Davis as the alternate for Zoning Hearing Board. Is Whitney available? Okay, we'll go ahead then, and we'll move this to full council on the 14th. And thank you so much. It was painless. So I'll hand this over to you, President Wida.
Thank you. Counselor Diaz.
To vote.
I'm sorry. So my understanding is now the motions are stacked concurrently. Do we need a vote to move them all through? I'm deferring to Mr. Harris here.
We just moved them.
We just did.
We're good? We're good?
Yeah, we-
Votes? Okay, great. Then thank you, Counselor Diaz. That brings us then to the Community Planning Committee. Counselor Craig?
Thank you, Council President. We have one item on the agenda, Resolution number 61, 2021, amending the sewer control plan for a project at 342 to 344 West Orange Street. And are you going to speak to this, Douglas?
Okay. Hi. Good evening, councilors. Good evening, Mayor. I think I can keep this short and sweet. So typically, when you see these sewer modules, it's for the land development that's taking place. In this case, it is a subdivision of 2 lots. So 2 lots are being cut in half so that we'll have 4 lots at the end. Because there's no development on these portions of lots that are being created, there is a requirement from the state to allocate sewer capacity for these new lots. So that is what is requiring a sewer planning module in this case. So there's no construction that's a part of this, this project. These are lots that front on West Orange and on West Grant Street. So they're being cut so that there's development potential on the West Grant Street side. Just as a reminder, basically this is sort of a hypothetical sewer allocation in this case. So in the future, if someone wants to develop a lot, there will be opportunity for, say, a single family home or something to be put there without needing to go to DEP for approval.
Thank you so much. Questions from the committee? Questions from the public? A motion to move this to full council on the 14th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Council President, that concludes community planning.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. Oh, look at that.
There he is.
As anyone can guess, whenever Mr. Hopkins approaches the commission table, it is time for the Finance Committee. Councilor Bakay.
Thank you so much. This evening, we have several bills and resolutions related, some to the 2022 budget. And Mr. Hopkins has a presentation this evening that will cover in part or full each of those. So we're going to start with his presentation, and he'll give us a cue for each of the bills that are coming up when he speaks about them.
Give me just a minute for the technology transfer here. Okay. All right. Thanks, Councilor Bakay, for that introduction. And as you said, there are 5 items on the agenda this evening. I'd say four of those 5 are really sort of directly 2021 or 2022 budget related. And then the 5th one, which relates to transfer of funds from the city's general fund reserves to the internal service fund, is obviously finance related, but it's not really directly related to either the 21 or 22 budget. So as Councilor Bakay said, this presentation will sort of cover at least in some way each of those items. If there are questions along the way, please ask them. This presentation is only 15 slides, including the cover page, so I've tried to boil it down even more than I normally do. So ask questions along the way if you have them. And then when we get to the end of this, if there are questions about any of the individual items on the agenda, please let me know. So with that, I'll move to, as soon as I turn the power on, move to the first page of the presentation, which is really just a very quick summary overview of the highlights of the 22 budget as we proposed it. As the mayor talked about when she introduced the budget with her budget address on the 23rd of November, this budget proposes no real estate tax increase for 2022. We have included, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we have included what in the American Rescue Plan Act is referred to as revenue loss calculation or revenue replacement calculation for use of ARPA funds to support the city's general government operations. And that's a specific piece of the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, that provides for use of ARPA funding for support of those general government operations, but only for a 4-year time period. And it's specifically for revenue loss calculation between 2020 and 2019, and then for the next 3 years after that. And so you'll see that more in the 5-year projection when I get to that. We also have included in this budget the second year of the refinancing savings that we achieved in the bond refinancing that we did in October. We have EIT revenues are rebounding nicely. Actually, the day that the budget was introduced, that morning we got our most recent update from the Lancaster County Tax Collection Bureau, which showed that our 2021 EIT revenues are about 5.3% above our 2020 revenues at the same time period. So basically through the first 3 quarters of the year. So that's that's good news. We're basically running even with 2019. So it's certainly rebounded. We haven't gone higher than 2019, but we're, within like $10,000 of where we were at this time period in 2019. And then finally, real estate transfer tax revenues are still very strong. We have a budget this year of $1.3 million, and through November, we've collected about $1,425,000, I believe, in real estate transfer tax revenue. So we're already over budget in that revenue source. In the Stormwater Management Fund, we have no stormwater fee increase in the 22 budget, and really just somewhat of a status quo budget in stormwater with a continuation of green infrastructure projects that tie into all of the EPA-related EPA consent decree-related work. In the sewer funds, we have no sewer rate increase proposed here as well. We additionally have that year 2 of the bond refinancing savings that we achieved in the October refinancing of the 2011 and some of those other bond issues. And then, we have the mandated planning and projects continuing for the EPA consent decree, the long-term control plan, which is in process right now. And you'll hear more about that from Steve Campbell when he presents the Public Works budget for 2022 via video, not live, because he will not be here that Saturday. In the water funds, we have, as you know, a ongoing Public Utility Commission rate case for the rates that apply to our customers who are outside of the city limits. We have included in this budget an estimate of revenues both from the outcome of that rate case and also an anticipation of coming to you with a proposal for modifying inside city rates, basically to true up those rates after we have a PUC, either a decision or a settlement through that rate-making process. So we don't have a piece of legislation now to talk about those inside city rate increases, but we would come back to you. At this point, I'm estimating in April or May of 2022 with a proposal there, again, to true things up with related to the outside rate increase. And then we have the ongoing capital investments. You all have seen the work at the South Tank on Millersville Pike. We have the large diameter main project, which continues, and a whole host of other capital projects within the water system to improve and maintain that system and, well, bring it into, hopefully into the early 21st century. And then in the Solid Waste and Recycling Fund, as the mayor talked about in her address, we have a proposal for a $4 per quarter rate increase for residential customers. And I have a slide in this presentation which will show you the rationale behind that rate increase and other rate increases that we are having to fulfill that leads to the rate increase proposal for our inside city customers. So with that sort of highlights of the budget, let me jump into some numbers. I always present this slide as the first one just to give a sense of the scope of what we're talking about here. $131 million essentially for all of the 5 operating budgets, the general fund, the stormwater management fund, sewer fund, water fund, and solid waste and recycling fund. So you can see the general fund is about 51% of the overall budget. Next in line is the water fund at 27%, and then you see the percentages for the other pieces of the pie there. But just to give you a sort of a sense of the scope of everything, the majority of what I'm going to talk about here tonight, as usual, is within the general fund. I'll show you when we're talking about costs or other things that are related to funds outside of the general fund as well. So this is a breakdown of the revenue sources that we have in the general fund. Typically, property taxes have been close to 50% of the budget. This year, you see that they are about 46% of the overall revenues. And the real reason for that is the piece of the pie that's listed as ARPA revenue replacement at $4.5 million, or 7% of the overall budget. If that piece of the pie were not here, the mayor talked about the reality that we'd be having a very different conversation about the 2022 budget if we did not have the American Rescue Plan Act funding in place. If you look at that use of reserves slice of the pie at 3% and the revenue replacement at 7%, that effectively identifies what the structural deficit is in this budget. The use of reserves number is lower than we've typically presented to you. We've been more in the about 5 or 6% range. And during the year, often we're able to eliminate that use of reserves because we try to be conservative in our revenue estimates. And then when good things happen, that's additional money that we have in the budget or have available to us. And we try to be realistic about our expense budgets and then work during the year to reduce our costs. And we have cost savings from the usual vacancies and things like that occur during the year. But the American Rescue Plan Act funding replacement at 7% of the budget is a big chunk of the pie. As I said before, that's a figure that can be in place for 4 years. And the first year relates to one of the ordinances on the agenda, which is identifying the Rescue Plan Act funding we are eligible to use to put into place for the 2021 fiscal year. That $4.5 million then is an estimate for the revenue loss that we would be eligible to receive from ARPA for 2022 budget, which is comparing 2021 audited revenues to 2020 audited revenues. So we won't have that calculation, obviously, until we have the 2021 audit completed. And as you know, that schedule, that will be July, August, September of next year. So that is an estimate right now based on the way the Rescue Plan Act revenue replacement calculation worked for this year. And I'll talk about that a little bit later when I show you the 5-year projection. And then, the other pieces of the pie have been very steady, which in one way is a good thing and another way is a bad thing, because what we don't have, and what the mayor has addressed many, many times, as have I, is that we do not have a revenue source that grows on an annual basis to keep up with the cost increases that we see for salaries, for benefit costs, and for our operating costs. And without that type of revenue source that grows on a regular basis, we continue to have a structural deficit. And that's where the additional changes that really need to come from Harrisburg to change the structure of the type of revenue sources that we have and provide us with a different type of revenue source that could grow on an annual basis. That's why that needs to come from Harrisburg. Next slide is one that you're also familiar with, is comparing sort of the pieces of the pie. We break it down by salaries, benefits, operating costs, and debt service. These year in and year out are very static numbers percentage-wise. Obviously, the numbers, the actual dollar amounts grow on an annual basis when we're introducing a new budget, but the percentages are broken down fairly much the same. If I showed you this pie chart from like 2007, it would be almost identical percentage-wise. The one big difference here is debt service, and you can see the result of that refinancing that we did earlier this year and how that plays out in 2022, because we have, and this is, I want to point out too, that the pie chart on the left is comparing the budget. So our debt service actually in 2021 going to be $1.5 million or $1.6 million lower than that $5.3 million. But this was the adopted budget in 2022. The budget that we proposed for in 2021, the budget that we proposed for 2022 includes the savings that we know we've achieved with that refinancing. So that's why you see debt service drop from 8% of the budget down to 6% of the budget. But again, the other pieces of the pie are pretty even. And then the other thing to point out is that in total, the general fund budget that we proposed is just under 4% higher than the adopted 2021 budget. And there I really have to point back to the ARPA revenue replacement and the good year that we had in 2020 and we're projecting to have in 2021 really makes that increase possible. Again, we'd be having a very different conversation about potential reductions in services or a need for a real estate tax increase if the combination of things that of American Rescue Plan Act and the 2021 results that we're projecting didn't come to play. A second. So year in and year out, one of the biggest cost drivers that we have is on the benefit side of the equation, which is from this part of the budget is about 31, or this part of the presentation is about 31% of the overall budget. And when you look at the medical benefits piece of this, we've talked about this before that, we went to self-insurance for medical claims in 2012. This chart right here is showing, and this is one area where I'm going outside of the general fund. This is looking at all of the operating funds of the city. So this is the total claims cost, third-party administrator cost, everything all in for medical and prescription costs. And the bars that you see are 2015 through 21 projected, and the percentages at the top are the increases over the prior year. So in 2015, we spent about $11.7 million on medical claims and prescription claims, and that was a 6.2% increase over the prior year. Then you see those increases over the next 6 years. If I had this bar chart back to 2012, what you would see is that taken as a whole, the increases on an annual basis, so averaging out all the increases over that time period, we'd have increase on an annual basis of about 2.5%. So when you compare that to medical inflation, which is somewhere in the 6 to 8% range now, that's where we know that, when we measure this against what we would be paying in premiums if we had stayed fully insured, we certainly would have been paying much higher premiums on an annual basis than we're paying in claims cost. That said, even when we have only a 1.8% increase in, what I'm showing there is projected 2021 compared to the audited 2020 numbers, it's still more than a $300,000 increase. Not an awful lot of money in the grand scheme of a $130 million budget, but it's still a $300,000 increase. The next thing that I wanted to show you is we get on, I believe it's a biweekly basis from Capital Blue Cross, information that drills down to the specific prescription, claims, facility fees, facility costs, so hospitalization or other costs that are related strictly to COVID. And this also includes the cost for testing. So we get that report and it boils everything down. And I looked back at the first report that we got that I believe was in January of 2021, and it showed all claims incurred and paid in 2020. So that was about $85,000 of claims. And then the second bar that you see there is everything that we have paid through November 28th that is related strictly to COVID. So if you take those two together, we're looking at nearly $500,000 of medical claims cost over the last 2 years. And, the large majority of that in 2021, that's related strictly to COVID. So had the pandemic not existed, we would have had about a $500,000 reduction in those, in our overall claims cost. So I wanted to point that out when we talk about one of the legislative items that's on this agenda, which is a proposal to transfer $1.5 million of general fund reserves into the internal service fund. And the reason for that is, if you look, let me try to get this pointer on here. You're not going to see that on the screen. All right, let me do it a different way. So this is, and I apologize for all the numbers on the spreadsheet. Don't worry so much about all of the numbers, but I want to point out a few to you. So the internal service fund is outside of each of the operating funds. And what we do is we budget in each department in the general fund, and then in each of the enterprise funds, stormwater, sewer, water, and solid waste and recycling. We budget an annual amount to be transferred into the internal service fund. And it's from the internal service fund that we actually pay the claims. So we're paying Capital Blue Cross, we're paying any of our prescription costs that come through. That's where we're paying the claims from. On an annual basis, I look at I started with the September, and then I typically move to the October month end. And what I'm showing you here is a September month end report that details, so for administrative services, which includes the mayor's office, solicitor's office, Dunn, Loop, and admin services. We're showing city contributions of $262,500. So that's through September. So that's 2/3 of the year of contributions from the general fund in admin services into the internal service fund. We have retiree contributions, employee contributions. So that's the quote unquote revenues, so $284,000 of revenues. And then these are all the costs that we're paying out of the internal service fund, which is retiree claims paid, employee claims, retiree premiums, because what we're paying for folks who are Medicare eligible, Medicare is primary, and then we have basically a Medigap policy that we're covering retirees with. We have administrative fees for employees and retirees. We have health savings account contributions for those who are in our high deductible health plan. We have that could. So there isn't anything that's directly in ARPA that talks about covering those costs directly.
Well, to my knowledge, I know that a lot of locations, many people can go get them at no cost. So my question is, if that was the case, which it was, because I got tested a couple times without having to pay anything, and not even providing my health insurance, which I do have it through LGH. But my question is, the expense I know was above normal, so why wasn't the city telling the employees to go to these locations to get tested?
So and I don't think I have one of the spreadsheets up, but the testing piece of that $500,000 is extraordinarily small. I mean, it might be in the $10,000 or $15,000 range. Where the big cost came in is where there were hospitalizations. We did have some significant long-term hospitalizations of some employees, and that's where the really large majority of the number came from. On the testing piece, if we were to set up employee testing and paid a provider to come in and do testing, that is a directly reimbursable expense through ARPA. The costs that we're incurring this way are folks who they might be going to their primary care physician, they might be going to an urgent care or something like that to get tested. And so those are rolling through, and they're showing their insurance card, their city insurance card for that. And those are rolling through as part of the expenses that Capital Blue Cross is showing to us.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
Anything else from counselors on this particular piece before Mr. Hopkins continues? Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to have you just keep going. I'll just assure the public that we're going to get to public comment as well. I just want to allow you to continue.
Sure.
I think this is
we
generally uploaded to the city
We'll
website,
get
right?
this uploaded to the city website. The budget is on there now, has been up there since, I think, the 24th. So we'll get this presentation also uploaded at the same place
Great.
on the city website.
Thank you.
So this is looking just at the last 3 years for each of those sections in that internal service fund. And then I'll get to the square there on the left that's looking at individual department increases. I just wanted to show you this more as looking at the trends. So if you look at admin medical, it stayed relatively flat over this 3-year period. So the first bar in each of these sections is 2020 actual expenses, 2021 budget for the transfers in the internal service fund, and then the proposed 2022 transfer to the internal service fund. So a slight increase in admin services, but not a whole lot. In the police bureau, you saw what those two sections look like, or that section for the police bureau look like. And that's a combination of increases in for both active employees and also retirees. One of the challenging aspects in police and fire is that, and when it comes to medical insurance, so most non-uniform retirees, they leave us at, close to 65 because folks are then eligible for Social Security, or even after 65 when they work here several years after they're eligible for Social Security. And they immediately transition into Medicare being their primary medical coverage, and then the city's coverage is secondary. So it's a much reduced cost. In the police and fire bureaus, we have an age 60 mandatory retirement date. So those police officers and firefighters, if they work to age 60, they then have 5 additional years until they're eligible for Medicare. So we're essentially paying a retiree benefit to them between their date of retirement and when they turn 65. That's essentially the same as what their active benefits were. And then when they hit Medicare eligibility, then they become Medicare eligible and the city's coverage becomes secondary. So that's an expensive, at least 5-year period for the coverage benefit for those employees. So again, police, you see there on the active fire, we've been pretty steady. Retiree fire, we've had some increases there over that 3-year period. This is the budget for CPED medical, and like I said, I think, we righted the ship in 2020, and now we've gotten to a point where it seems like what we're putting into the internal service fund is at least enough or a little bit more than we need to cover the ongoing claims cost. In general funds, Department of Public Works, we were steady for those 2 years, and you'll see that there's an increase in DPW general fund. Stormwater has been flat, sewer has been flat. Water fund, the trend line is actually down because we're seeing, for whatever reason, over the last couple of years, if I took this bar chart back another 3 years, you would have seen steady increases because we were trying to cover some prior year losses, and now we're back up to a point where we can actually dial back the amount that we're putting into the internal service fund and still cover ongoing claims. And then in solid waste and recycling, we just a slight uptick there in what we budgeted in 2022. But in the 2022 budget, which is here, where you're seeing increases are $30,000 in administrative services, $430,000 in police budget, and that's a combination of for both active and retiree benefits. $75,000 in the Fire Bureau, and that's all in the retiree benefit category. In general fund DPW, another $250,000. So when you look at the increase in the overall benefit costs between 2021 and 2022, you see a total of $785,000 increase for the internal service fund. So the concept of the transfer of $1.5 million is basically to recover from a few years of being underwater and bring that fund balance up somewhat. And then these increases in the general fund budget are to keep that fund balance in place or maybe even expand it a little bit. With the transfer of that we're proposing from the general fund reserves to the internal service fund, we would have a combined fund balance in the internal service fund of about 10% of our annual claims cost. I'd really prefer that to be closer to 20% because of the variability in year to year with our claims costs, but 10% at least is getting us back to getting back toward where we really need to be, which is certainly a lot higher than an $11,000 fund balance. And then in the water fund, you see a reduction of $300,000 in that budget, and in solid waste and recycling, a proposed increase of $60,000. Another benefit increase that we are seeing trending is on the pension side of things. So in this bar chart, showing you 2017 through 2022 budgets for pension expenses. And the first bar of each of these sections is the police pension obligations. And this is a combination of both the minimum municipal obligation and also the debt service on the pension obligation bonds that we have for both police and fire. So in police, it was about $3.5 million in 2017, and you can see it's grown to over $5 million in 2022. In the Fire Bureau, it has, we're at about $2,750,000, and we're actually just a little bit above that in 2022. And if I could show you some forecasts going forward, you would actually see that the fire obligation is going down while the police one continues to go up, at least for another several years. And then in the non-uniforms, very small compared to police and fire, and that has stayed, that has gone up somewhat. And one of the differences there is that we made we have two different plans for non-uniformed employees. One is the cash balance pension plan, where the city makes a contribution of 4% of the employee's salary, and there is no employee contribution at all. And then there's a supplemental pension plan, which is much more like a private sector 401k type program, where the employee can contribute up to 10% of their salary, and the city makes a 25 cents on the dollar match to that contribution. The benefit of that type of plan to the employee, obviously, is that they start early on in their career and they stay here for a full career. They're getting the benefit of their own contributions, but also the city match, and then any growth in investment earnings on that plan. And it's employee directed, so they get to decide what the investment mix in there is there. The city used to cap the contribution, that 25 cents on the dollar. The city's contribution was capped at 5% of the employee contribution. So if an employee contributed 5% of their salary, the city would match 25 cents on the dollar up to that 5%. But we wouldn't match the other 5% of the employee contribution. And I believe it was 2 years ago, we made a change to match all the way up to that 10%, because one of the things we were trying to do was incentivize employees to participate in that supplemental plan, really to better their savings for retirement for later on in their career. Younger employees typically will just ignore pension and, post-retirement as a thing that's in some fantastical future down the road. The other change that we made was to employees are automatically opted in to participating in the supplemental plan at a 3% contribution. They have to actively opt out. And it used to be the opposite, where you weren't eligible to participate in the plan for a year, and then you had to actively opt into the plan. And with that structure, we had about 60% of non-uniformed employees 60% participating in the plan. And now we have 95% of the employees participating in the plan. So it's made a huge difference. There's a cost increase to that, but we think that cost increase is worth it to have employees be able, over their career, to set themselves up for a better retirement than they would have otherwise. So, and then this green bar is the amount of funding that we get from the state to offset our pension obligations. If I took this back to 2016, our pension state aid that we got would actually be close to 100% of our total pension obligations. And unfortunately, you see the trend line here is from 2019, we saw a reduction in that state aid amount in 2020. We saw another reduction this year. We got that toward the end of September. I think it was a 3.6% reduction in 2021. What we've budgeted for is that it's just going to be flat in 2022, but we won't know that until September of 2022. We're hoping that there's not going to be a third year of a reduction. Indications that we've gotten from Conrad Siegel, who's our actuary for the pension plans, are that we probably shouldn't see a reduction, but, that is up to a bunch of other people that aren't in this room. So, when you're looking at the general trend line of our overall pension costs increasing and the state aid decreasing, that also sets us up for, another difficulty within the general fund. The next slide I wanted to show you is now flipping to that bond refinancing that I talked about earlier. What I wanted to do is just give you a picture of our total bond fund refinancing savings that we've had since 2010. So each of these is a bond refinancing, and then the total savings that we netted out with that refinancing, and then split out across general sewer and water funds. This one was a little bit unusual in that this was the refinancing of the note for the fire stations. And rather than reducing or getting some savings out of the lower interest rate that we got additional proceeds from that bond issue that we could put into those fire stations. As you know, the West King Street Fire Station is completed and the East King Street Fire Station is ongoing. But in total, if you look over all of those refinancings, we've had about $21.5 million in either net actual savings or in additional proceeds out of the refinancing of that bond issue, or that note in the case of the 2019 note. And then you see the breakout by individual fund. So in the general fund, about $5.8 million. In the sewer fund, the vast majority of that savings came with the one that you all approved in October at 6.1 million total. And then in the water fund, about $9.5 million of total refinancing savings. So just wanted to give you that as a picture. As you know, the general fund refinancing savings was in 2021 and 2022, and then it goes away. So one of the things you'll see in the 5-year projection is the impact of that savings going away looks like an increase, well, and it is an increase, right, from the 2022 budget to the 2023 budget as we have in the projection. This slide goes to the solid waste and recycling fee increase that we proposed of $4 per quarter for each residential unit. And the increase breaks down across 3 different sectors of what makes up the services that we provide in the solid waste and recycling fund. As you know, we went out to bid for a new hauler contract in 2020. That contract went into place, I believe it was October 1st of 2020. And the contract has built into it certain escalators based on cost increases that the hauler fees. So for labor cost, for fuel cost, and regular operating costs. So based on that contract, the hauler fee, this is what they get per residential unit, increases from $123.48 per year, and it goes to $129.53 per year. So that is one part of the $16 per year increase that we're looking at for solid waste and recycling. The second part is what we pay to the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority for the tipping and transfer fee. And that fee, Laxwama is increasing that from $82 a ton to $85 a ton in 2022. That's another sector of the cost increase. And then the fee that we pay for the processing of the yard materials that are picked up at curbside, so the yard waste bags that are put out at curbside and we pick up, the processing fee for that will go from $30 a ton to $35 a ton. So the good news is that on a year-over-year basis, we picked up more and more at curbside in those yard waste bags. And what that does is takes weight out of here, so we're not paying it, people aren't putting it in their trash, and we're not picking it up and throwing it and it going to the Solid Waste Management Authority. So rather than paying, this year $82 a ton for getting rid of that stuff if it were thrown in the trash, we're paying $30 a ton to process it and for it to become, mulch or, dirt. But at the same time, it's still a fee increase, and we have to look at how that fee increase impacts the solid waste budget itself. So that's what makes up the increase of $4 per quarter for every residential unit. We implemented the single hauler program in 2006, and at that time, the annual fee was $200 per unit. So with this proposal, we'll bring it up to $278 per unit. And when you look at that increase over the life of the program from 2006 to 2022, it would be an annual increase of about 2.9%, which is inclusive of the hauler fee increases that we've seen, the Solid Waste Management Authority tipping fee increases that we've seen, and adding additional services, right? When we started the program, we didn't pick up yard waste at the curbside. You all have probably seen the partnership between a volunteer group and Mike Devaney and his team in solid waste management for composting. Thank you. That's the term that I was looking for. So there was a composting set up at Musser Park, and there's a few that are planned out in some other parks. So the number of services that have expanded within that fee, is a benefit to our residents. And the more, Mike Devaney's goal is take more and more and more items out of the trash stream and get it into either recycling or composting for that yard waste material. Any questions about any of that? I think that Steve Campbell covers some solid waste and recycling related things in his budget, so I don't want to dive too deeply into that, but I wanted to give an indication as to why we proposed that fee increase. And this is really, these last three slides are all related to five-year projections. So counselors, you've seen this year in and year out, but folks who are here in the audience, each year that we introduce a budget, we also present a five-year projection, and the 5 years starts with the budget that we're presenting and then an additional 4 years. So the first column in here is looking at our 2020 audited figures, where we had about a $400,000 deficit, and this is general fund only, so about a $400,000 deficit. Now that was compared to about a $2.5 million deficit in the budget that we presented for 2020. So we were able to significantly reduce that use of reserves. So we ended 2020 with a fund balance of about $15 million, which equates to about 25% or about 3 months of expenses, which is right in the guidance for where municipalities ought to be, is to have a fund balance that reflects about a third of a year, about 3 months of the year of expenses. In the 2021 budget that was adopted, we had a budgeted deficit of $4.9 million. So that would have brought our general fund reserve down to just over $10 million, or about 15.5%. The big differences here are, one, the ARPA revenue replacement figure for 2021, and this is, again, included in the 2021, if you adopt the ordinance that we have in front of you, would be included as 2021 revenues, but it's really a reflection of 2021 audited revenues versus 2019 audited revenues. And that's all about how the American Rescue Plan Act is written as it relates to this revenue replacement or revenue loss number. We engaged Mayor Dussel, as you know, as our auditor to do the calculation. It is, I won't show you the chart that is in the ARPA guidance, but it's very complicated, and it's not just a look at the general fund, it's a look at all of the funds of the city with the exception of the water fund. And for whatever reason, while they describe utilities as not being included, not being included in the calculation, the stormwater management fund, the sewer fund, and the solid waste and recycling funds revenues are actually included in that. The other sort of unusual part of the revenue loss calculation is the ARPA legislation and the Treasury guidance that was written to support it basically looks at, you can compare 2019 revenues to 2021 revenues as if your annual increase normally in revenues is 4.1%. So the revenue loss isn't our audited 2020 revenues versus our audited 2019 revenues. It's our audited 2019 revenues versus if our 2020 revenues had gone up 4.1% over 2019. Does that make sense? It's a very bizarre way of looking at things, but I guess across the nation, on average, municipal revenues grow at a rate of about 4.1%. I would love it if our revenues grew at 4.1% every year, because that would mean we wouldn't have a structural deficit. So we get the benefit of that interpretation by Treasury as to how that revenue loss calculation gets done. And at the same time, it's for a 4-year period, right? So the revenue loss calculation that Mayor Dussel established for us, we got that number in November, was $3,159,776. That was, the general fund portion of it was actually closer to $4.5 million, but it was offset by some revenue growth that we had, especially in the sewer fund, because we had a sewer rate increase in 2020. So in a bizarre way, an increase in some of those other funds actually hurts us on the revenue loss calculation. So without an increase proposed in the sewer fund, without a stormwater increase proposed for 2022, and with a very small increase in solid waste and recycling, the projection that we have is for $4.5 million of ARPA revenue loss in 2022 in the 2022 budget. So that's what you see. There's a new line item in the revenues in the general fund for that revenue replacement, and that's where that $4.5 million comes from. And then these are really, frankly, just placeholders, the $4 million for 2023 and 2024, because we don't really know what that calculation is going to look like. We'll have a better picture after the 2021 audit is completed, and we have the real revenue replacement or revenue loss calculation done, and that will be showing up in the next 5-year projection. And, you know, all in, we also had higher than projected general fund revenues of about $1 million versus the 2021 budget. So we end up with about a $63.7 million of revenue versus the budget, which had $59.6 million of revenue. And then on the expense side, as you can see, we had a total budget of about $64.5 million in total expenses, and we ended up the year with, projecting to end up the year with just under $62 million of expenses. About $1.5 million of that is from the bond refinancing that we did. So all in, versus a $4.9 million deficit, we're projecting about a $1.7 million surplus for 2021. So that's the just for this year, and this $1.7 million is really the reason for the $1.5 million transfer to the internal service fund, because we've eliminated the deficit that we had in the 2021 budget, and we actually end up with a bit of a surplus, and it makes sense to put that into the internal service fund so that we sort of right that ship itself. The 2022 proposed budget then is in this column. Again, most other things being equal, we're not increasing the real estate tax rate, and so we don't see any change there in real estate tax revenues. Earned income taxes going up, not because of rate increase, but because of the continued improvement that we're seeing there. And then these other revenue sources being fairly static. So a $64,850,000 revenue budget, and then a total expense budget, like I said, of about 3.96% higher than 2021 budget. That would end the year with a $2.2 million deficit, bringing our reserve down to about $14.5 million. This does not include that transfer to the internal service fund, right? So with that transfer, if it's approved by council, we would bring the general fund balance down to about $15.2 million. I fully expect that we can at least eliminate some amount of this $2.2 million deficit in 2022 through the normal methods. We're trying to be conservative on revenues. We know that we will have vacancies during the year. We know departments work to reduce their operating costs during the year. So I think realistically, we end up better than that $2.2 million use of reserves in 2022. The real issue that we have when we look out at some of these outer years is, one, in 2023, the bond refinancing savings goes away. So you see bond debt service go from $3.6 million in 2022 to $5.6 million in 2023. And we're continuing with $4 million use of reserves, but the deficit grows, or use of reserves grows to $5.9 million. Go to the next year, it increases to $7.2 million, and by then, we've almost wiped out the entire general fund reserves. Then the ARPA revenue replacement number goes away, and that's where, and the mayor has talked about this, and we've actually engaged PFM again to do some work with us, basically to try to, what do we need to do to avoid that fiscal cliff? The ARPA revenue replacement is a fantastic tool, but it's a short-term tool. We can't wait until the end of 2024 to try to figure out how we avoid that fiscal cliff. We need to start now. And we also need to continue the work that the mayor's been doing with folks in Harrisburg to try to get some change there. If you looked back at these charts over years that I've presented them, they always, out in the third and fourth and fifth years, look this bad. right? There's always a significant use of reserves over, growing over a period of years. We've made changes along the way. There have been tax increases. There have been changes in services that we provide or reduction in number of employees. Somewhere along the way, this ship has to be righted, and it's going to be a combination of multiple things that's going to right it, and hopefully with some additional help from Harrisburg. The next two are really just looking at just that general fund reserve part. So this is all of those numbers from that previous chart, but just looking at the general fund reserve. So with the 2021 projected being at $16.7 million, and then reducing over that period of time based on those changes that you see. The last slide in the presentation is what that would look like if we didn't have that ARPA revenue replacement figure in there. The cliff comes much earlier and it's much steeper. So again, while that revenue replacement funding is an excellent tool and, saves us somewhat for the next several years, it's not going to last for forever. Don't anticipate another ARPA coming along anytime soon. And so, we've got some significant work to do over the next several years. And that is the last slide of 15. So I'll open it up for anybody who has questions.
Thank you. Yes, Council President?
Yeah, I want to briefly make a note to the folks that were here for appointments that they can go.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Folks, if you were just here because your name came up on an appointment, we thank you very much for agreeing to serve on one of our boards, commissions, and authorities. And if you don't want to stick around for the next hour of this, you are welcome to take this time to step out.
Or you
You're also welcome to stay.
You can stay, yes.
We won't take names of anybody who leaves, right?
No, that's quite all right. So, Mr. Harris, just as a point of clarification, Bills 24, which is adopting the city budget, and Bill 25 was already introduced at the previous council meeting. That's correct. So we don't, we're not moving that forward, but we are discussing it.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is just start with those two items and take any council comments on those two items. Again, Bill 24, adopting a city budget, and Bill 25, setting the real estate tax rate for the year. So we'll start with those. I see Councilor Diaz.
Please?
Yes.
Okay, so when we receive the funding for the ARPA, where does it sit and does it collect any type of interest?
So we established a separate bank account. That was one of the requirements, U.S. Treasury. Yes, it can earn interest, and those interest earnings then sort of become ARPA dollars. The downside of that is there isn't a whole lot of interest out there to be earned right now. These are, we were able to draw down 50% initially. So that was in, I think it was July 2nd or July 3rd. We drew down the first 50%, which was around $19 million. The next 50%, the way the guidance was written, it said it can't be drawn down any sooner than a year after that. So we expect that the second half will be drawn down sometime after July of 2022. As those funds sit in the account, it's sitting in a money market account, but money market accounts are paying like point, how many digits after the decimal point, and then one. It's very small. But yes, we can earn interest, but
It's minimal.
interest rates are minimal right now.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
Sure.
Thank you. Other council comments?
Yep.
Councilor Garcia
So
Molina.
one question related to the benefits. I know that Sarah's time has ended with us last month, but did we find that there was any kind of savings that came from the health and wellness coordinator position?
We've talked about this internally. It is a real challenge to, especially when you look at those numbers, to say the creation of this position has definitively helped us reduce our medical claims cost. whether it's Sarah or anybody else in that position, can do a phenomenal job, and we can have 3 strokes, and we could have 3 really significant medical claims that would blow any improvements that we've made out of the water. What Sarah was able to do in the time that she was here was, one, her role expanded out into working with the safety committees, working with on workers' comp claims and things like that. So it really expanded beyond just medical wellness. But she was able to get out with employees all throughout the city, get much more engagement in the sort of city's medical benefits. And, we implemented the high deductible health plan, and she was able to communicate out to employees about that. I still strongly believe in that program, and we want to continue to try to incentivize people to move toward that program. So I wish I could say yes, definitively, the salary of that position has more than paid for itself in, reduction in claims. The fact that our medical claims cost over time has been much lower than the, regular medical inflation that we see across the country, is an indicator, but that also predated the creation of that position, right? So I would love to be able to give you a straight answer, yes, X, and then we had result Y. It's a harder calculation than that.
And so then, are you budgeting this year to fill that position
Yes.
again?
Yes,
Okay.
and actually, we have an accepted offer to fill that position.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more on those two? Okay, I'm going to open it up then to any comments from the public. Again, on Bill 24, adopting a city budget, and Bill 25, setting the city real estate tax rate. And if you could please start by saying your name and the block in which you live for the public record. Thank you.
My name is Ivan Acosta Velez. I live at 804 Highland Avenue. 3 questions, Mr. Hopkins. Number 1, you mentioned there that you're putting police and retired police together. Is there any way when you presented that could be divided? Because it's looking like the police is really draining our budget. And we have, in something that you presented, that you said you were retired police were included.
I think that's
and
the next bar
present
graph.
police.
Yep. So these 2 sections this is police active. So this bar is 2020, 2021, and 2022. So you can see the sort of trend line there, and that's a reflection of what the active employees' claims look like. And then this is the police retirees, 2020, 21, and 22. So again, we're seeing that increase.
So when you have that percentage of police there and you're having these bars here, is there somehow that can be divided? So it could be more clear to us public?
So in the line item detail of the budget, there is actually a police active employees medical coverage and a police retiree medical coverage line item in there.
Okay, the other question has to do with the fire department. You said that the fire department, that was just retirees? I didn't
So,
understand too
yeah,
well, there was no cost from.
This portion, the $75,000, in the same thing in the fire bureau budget, there's a line item for medical for active firefighters, and there's a line item for medical for retiree firefighters. The line item for active firefighters is staying the same. The line item for the retiree medical is increasing by $75,000.
Okay, so the only increase that you have in that part has to do with retirement?
Right.
Okay.
In the police budget, it's a combination of the two. Both the active coverage number and the retiree coverage number are both going up.
The last question is, you mentioned we're going into a deficit down the line. Is that deficit also including what we're paying for this plan that we're looking to? Is that money coming from that deficit that we see for the future?
Are you talking
The
about
commercial, whatever plan that we're
the
having?
comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Um,
How much of that is part of coming into we having?
I'd say basically none of it. So I mean, that plan cost, I don't know, Chris, help me out, $275,000?
No, the implementation of the plan is gonna cost us money. So what I'm asking is, if that money, that, we're getting some people donating, but they're not donating the whole thing. We're putting something up. That money that we're putting up, is that gonna be part of the deficit
So,
that you're projecting for the future? So we're looking about making a comprehensive plan, and we're doing it with money to make a deficit, and that's what my concern, my question is.
yeah, so I mean, the 5-year projection that's done is really trying to look at things at a high level. I'm not digging into, well, for instance, debt service, right?
Excuse me, Patrick, just, I think, Ivan, the very simple answer to your question is no. Those costs were budgeted in this past budget year, and we did receive grant funding to support that, but that is not a driver to the deficit and
Right.
the numbers that Patrick is showing.
So you're saying that that is gonna be covered with grant money only?
Half of it is being covered by grant dollars, and the other half was budgeted in the 2021 budget. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's going to a deficit that he's saying to the future. So you're saying now it's not being as a deficit, but it's gonna end up as a deficit.
Well, we could make that case with absolutely everything we spend on.
No, we understand, but what I'm trying to say is he made the comment that we're going into a deficit, that you're saying, what, in 6 years maybe, or 5, if things don't pick up? We have to come up with a
Well,
plan?
in each of the years going forward, we're showing an operating deficit.
That you were losing that money that we have in escrow, right? Correct? If I understood you right?
Well, yeah, so we've got a general fund reserve. Every year that we have a deficit, we're drawing from those reserves to cover
Okay,
to
and
cover
so
that
you
deficit.
said that in 5 years
The
that
making
would,
of the plan.
okay, that's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments on bills 24 or 25? Good evening, Ms. Byrd.
Darlene, 200 blocks South Tennessee. I just want to go back to the slide that has the water broke down into 3 different categories. You have stormwater, the water fund. Need a clearer explanation about that.
Uh,
You got the sewer fund, the water fund, and then you had stormwater.
Yep.
Yep, right there.
That one.
This one?
Yeah, so explain a little bit to me how those 3 funds are different.
So they are distinct operating funds. So the stormwater management fees, so if you look at your, the quarterly bill that you get, it's got a water bill portion, it's got a sewer services portion, and it's got a stormwater portion. That stormwater portion is going directly into that stormwater management fund, and then that's paying for the services that are provided there.
Right, for the
So,
storm.
the maintenance of the rain gardens and new green infrastructure projects that are going on. And Steve will talk about this in his DPW presentation. One of the things that we've done is actually moved the trees crew from DPW and the general fund to stormwater, because trees are really actually part of green infrastructure and part of that, that whole
Right.
program. So,
Makes sense.
and then, sewer fund and water fund, one thing to point out there is that they're providing services not just within the city of Lancaster. So stormwater is strictly within the city of Lancaster.
Right.
Solid waste and recycling is strictly within the city of Lancaster.
Right.
And then the water fund and the sewer fund are providing services both inside and outside of the city.
Right, so when we talk about raising that revenue, you're looking at the revenue being increased from outside of the city for the water fund? You
Yeah,
said?
well, so a combination. In the water funds, for customers who are outside of the city, we have to go to the Public Utility Commission
And
to
get
get approval
permission.
of changes in those rates. We filed that rate case in September, I think it was, September 28th. And the timeline on that means that we have to have a decision from the Public Utility Commission by the end of June.
Right.
I anticipate that it's going to be sooner than that. Right now, we're just working on the idea that it'll be May, that we'd be able to have those rates approved. Once we get to a point where we think we know where those outside city rates are going to land, we would develop a proposal for a increase in the inside city rates that would be effective around the same time, maybe not the exact day, but effective around the same time for inside city customers.
And how much did you propose to raise the outside city water rates?
The number that we developed worked out to, I believe it was $9 per quarter for the average residential customer.
Okay. So the city would be close to that, if not more.
That was the inside, that
Oh,
was the
that was for
inside
the
city
inside.
number,
Already
right.
that.
The outside city number, I don't remember it off the top of my head on an annualized basis.
I remember you saying it hadn't been raised since 2013, so it was lagging behind.
Outside city rates weren't raised. That rate increase went into effect in March of 2015.
15.
Yep. So it's been 6 years,
Okay.
more
and
than
then
6
for-
years.
Okay, good. And then for the solid waste budget, we took a contract out in 2020. How long is that contract good for?
I believe it's a 5-year contract
Is
with
it
2
5? I thought it
one-year
was 3.
extensions.
That's why I was kind of like, it is a 5-year contract?
I believe that's right.
That's correct. Okay. And when we started collecting yard waste, wouldn't that have decreased what we needed to pay the solid waste? I guess it was Lancaster Solid Waste Management.
So the,
Because we used it as a.
I had a chart in a year or two ago about
Oh.
what we were seeing in the amount going to the, to Solid Waste Management Authority was going down. Our recycling rates were up,
Oh.
and we added yard waste collection, which, was part of that, reducing what
Right.
goes to Laxwama. 2020, we saw the change in what could be collected at curbside with recyclables, and that went from all sorts of stuff down to quote-unquote the big
Two
four.
2 or 3.
We saw people staying home a lot and apparently throwing out a whole lot of stuff because what went to Laxwama increased. And that seemed,
Guilty.
people cleaning out their basements and their closets and like getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff. So we actually
Right.
saw more going into the trash stream in 2020, and that continued into 2021. And then we see these other rate increases that we're getting. So that, like, all of those factors kind of come together.
Right. Okay, so when we talk about the real estate, and I think it's a little bit about like what Ivan was getting to on the projected budget, when we're looking at revenues on in real estate, and we're projecting all these affordable housings in the next couple of years, are we not seeing real estate taxes go up and more revenue coming in down the road? Because we're going in this greater deficit, but we were proposed we're going to present all these new housing projects within the next 5 years.
Yeah, so last year, Darlene, this is the most excruciating detail, which is that our assessed value across the entirety of the city increased by 0.2%, 0.2. And so what that just means that, even though our expenses, and we can look across to other cities and see their budgets increasing by 8%, 10% or more, we're trying to keep our costs lower, increasing only by 3 to 4% each year, which is like a cost of living increase. But our revenues aren't keeping pace with 3 to 4% each year. And so even though, and if you look back, even, what was that, the decade that Randy had, it was like 3% over 10 years between 2008 and 2018 or to 2017. We had only seen, it was 3%, right, Patrick?
It was a total of 1.5%.
Oh,
over,
1 point.
I believe, a 10-year period.
All right, I'll have to go back and pull that
So not-
number, but
Yeah.
the cumulative effect of the development that's happening is not been, does not necessarily translate into increased revenues. But what I will say is that the increased number of units of housing where people are going to live and pay earned income tax, that's where we can
We will see
see
the
an
increase.
increase in revenues to the city. Otherwise, not as much as we'd all like to think would be generated
Okay.
through the development.
And,
Right.
and that 5-year projection is, one, it's a projection, right? So some stuff is going to be wrong, some stuff is going to be right. We don't have any good history of the type, like adding 1,500 residential units and what that's going to do to tax revenue. So I haven't really built, all I've done is made assumptions that on average, our real estate, if we do nothing, our real estate tax revenues increase like 0.1% in a given year,
And that's
over
what the
year.
projection's based on, doing
And that's what the
nothing,
projection's
just
based
keeping
on.
it as it is.
I haven't really made projections for if we have 1,500 new residents because they're moving into these new units, what does that do to earn income taxes?
Right.
We're going to have to wait and see how, what the trends look like. And, that's why we do this 5-year projection every single year.
Right,
And also, we have to wait for them to be built.
yeah, right.
Oh, there's that too.
Yeah,
Right.
there's that.
So then, and then like back to what Ivan was saying, as far as the comprehensive plan and the things that we are planning and sitting here and planning for the next 5 years, we're not seeing them end results bringing in revenues for the city at all. We're just
Not
we
in that
can't-
5-year
not in
projection.
that 5-year
Right.
plan.
Right.
Okay, so it would affect afterward. And this was just on the real estate and the city budget, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
I thought we did solid waste, but okay.
I'm gonna go right down the agenda, but I want to make sure if anyone else has any comments on the first two bills, that they get a chance to speak this evening. And again, these are already on the agenda for the next council meeting. So then I will go ahead and, for the 21st, thank you, December 21st. So then I will go ahead and we can discuss Resolution 65. That's setting the solid waste and recycling fees. We have touched on that a bit. I'll hear a motion to move that to full council then on December 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and I will now open up any council comments for the resolution. And any comments for the public on Resolution 65? Okay. Okay, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Let's see, going down my little list here. Bill number 26, as appropriating American Rescue Plan Acts to the general fund for revenue replacement. Again, Patrick, you addressed this in your presentation. This needs two readings, is that correct? It's a bill.
Yes.
So I'll hear a motion then to move this bill to first reading, the council meeting on December 21st.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
That would need first reading at the December 14th meeting and then adoption on the 21st.
December 14th. Thank you very much for that point of clarification. December 14th then. I will hear any committee comments on that bill or any council comments on that bill. Comments from the public.
So how much, Ani, I'm sorry, because I wanted to ask my questions per side.
I understand.
Per slide, so that I could keep my train of thoughts
Trying to keep
going.
myself in
And
order
I would
too.
like to, make a suggestion that at next year's meeting, you do have copies of what's up there for the public. I mean, it's not that many people here, but it would have been good to be able to see it. But my question is, tell me again how much money they're looking to move?
Let me just get to the slide there so I can point it out for you. So it's these numbers here. So for 2021, which is what this ordinance is about, is $3,159,776.
Right. And then for the 22 budget, they're looking for how much?
4.5 million.
And will that be voted on the same time on the 14th and the 21st?
No, so, well, the
So how's
budget,
that work?
the budget would, the budget includes that as a revenue for 2022. When the actual calculation is done, won't be until September, I'd say, of 2022. So
It may be an
The
amended.
budget, as there are, monthly reports and things like that, it'll just be zero until we have that calculation done. And then we would come back to council, report what that figure is in actuality. Right now, that 4.5 million is just an estimate.
And I don't know if this actually relates to the ARPA or not, but as far as funding, I know just recently, the 2016 reallocations that we had. Are there any reallocations that are coming up from the leftover from the 2017 budget or the 18 or the 19?
No, those were only reallocations of bond proceeds, so nothing that you're seeing on the screen here, actually nothing I talked about today. So that's only, the bond funds are kept in separate individual funds. We've done all of the reallocations of all of the outstanding bond proceeds that we have
Right.
right
And how
now
about
with those ones that were
CDBG
done.
funds? Because we allocated, 2016 CDBG funds for stormwater for the Barney Plaza. Are there any
No.
monies left over
Unless
from
I'm missing something.
2017, 18, 19, or 20 of CDBG funds?
Yes, unless there's anything in the
Those,
bond
no-
funds.
none of those were CDBG funds that we talked about. I don't
October.
remember which, at the October meetings. There were,
Okay.
for Ewell Plaza, there was general fund dollars going in and then stormwater bond proceeds going into
And
that
leftover
project.
CDBG fund from 2016. Maybe check it out and look at it, I'm pretty sure.
Not CDBG funding, not for Ewell Plaza. We didn't,
Well,
I
maybe
didn't
you
present
moved
any.
it into something else, but yeah, there was leftover CDBG funds, because I specifically asked the question, why couldn't CDBG funds be allocated to something else? And the answer was to save taxes for tax increase, and I think, Izzy, you're the one to say it stops us from raising taxes when I ask those questions. But we got minutes, and it should be recorded, so if we can look at it, maybe you can just provide me an answer, I'd be okay.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Any other public comments on Resolution 65? Hearing none, then, all members of the committee in favor of moving this to the council meeting on December 14th? Aye. Thank you. Okay, that brings us then to, I'm sorry, that was Bill 26.
Bill number 26.
Point of order there. Apologies. That was item number 4 on your agendas, if you're playing along at home.
Number 27.
Yes, that was what that was. I said 65 twice. Yes. Mhm. Okay. Keep me straight, Mr. Harris. The last item on the agenda then was Bill 27, and that's appropriating funds from the general fund to the internal services fund. Again, this was addressed in your presentation that had to do with the healthcare costs that we looked at. Then to open that up, I'll hear a motion to move Bill number 27 to first read on the next council meeting on December 14th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments from the committee on this? Or council? Any comments from the public?
When we're moving these funds, Patrick, what's this gonna do to help the city? Because in the presentation, I know you said that it would take care of some of the insurance, but the insurance is gonna continue to go up.
Well, it is, and so fixing this issue within the internal service fund sort of has two parts. One is that transfer of a large portion of the 2021 projected surplus into the internal service fund deals with this issue here, which is right now we have a cumulative deficit of $833,000 in that fund. So that will reverse that course and so we'd have a fund balance then of about $700-some thousand in the general fund portion, and we have about an $845,000 fund balance in the enterprise fund portion. So combined, That'll represent about 10% of our annual spend. And then the second part of it is, let me get to the right slide. These increases over here is to deal with the fact that we know that some of our medical costs are increasing. So I'm trying to do two things. One is to fix the fund balance issue, and then try to fix the ongoing cost issue, not just in 2022, but presumably then we would be able to make smaller modifications in the individual department budget contributions to the internal service fund so that we maintain that fund balance. Several years ago, we had a fund balance that was close to 25%. We got really whacked in 2018 with I think we had 8 claims that went into hit our stop loss coverage. Those are claims that are more than $150,000 for each individual claim. So our challenge in the internal service fund is managing just regular ongoing claims for people going to the doctor and getting, general services, and then the significant claims, which are strokes and heart attacks and other things like that, which come with really significant big dollar expenses.
Okay, a suggestion for you. I was in a committee at Votech when I used to work, and we were self-insured. We had not a fund, but we bought some type of insurance, not the regular insurance, but to cover when we got zapped.
Yep.
So I wish that you look into that, because in the long run, it's gonna help us, because we can't continue moving stuff, because we're gonna continue getting into a deficit. And I know how you're gonna look at us, the citizens here, and come with, oh, we're gonna do this. I think you should look into, I don't know what they called it, because things have changed so much, but I was on that committee, and in that committee, they would buy some type of insurance to cover the zapping. And we're gonna get zapped, because a lot of people are sitting here and say, oh, we got zapped now with this, virus that's going on. But every time I open the news, there's another virus showing up. So we need to really look into that.
We have that coverage. So when we went to self-insurance, we got, it's called stop loss coverage. So when you have a claim that goes up to a specific amount, the insurance company covers everything above that. So we're self-insured from 2012 through 2020, I think it was, or 2019. That stop loss coverage kicked in at a claim that cost us $150,000 or more. So we pay $150,000, and the insurance company takes over after that. That increased to $175,000. I think it was 2019 or 2020, and we've maintained that rate at $175,000 now. We just got our coverage renewal back. We went out to market with it, and we got a zero cost increase for that coverage into 2022. So we've maintained that kind of a coverage all along. It's still $150,000 or $175,000. And that cost us, I think it's around $1 million a year for that coverage.
So I think we should really look into it and to maybe up it a little bit more, because we're gonna continue to get the fall. Really look at.
We have the coverage.
And you have the
trick
coverage,
is-
but I mean, look and see if it could be raised a little more, because we're gonna get really zapped. That's my
Short story is,
suggestion to you. As
if we reduce the amount that's covered by stop loss insurance, the stop loss insurance premium is going to go up at least that much, if not more.
Okay, all right.
So.
Thank you. Any other comments on Bill 27? Hearing none, having a motion and a second from the committee, all those in favor to move this to full council for a first reading on December 14th? Aye. Thank you very much. And I believe that concludes the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you, Councilor Bakay, and thank you, Mr. Hopkins. That brings us to the Economic Development Committee. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Council President. I have a brief but important update regarding the American Rescue Plan Act for the committee. and council, as well as to clarify next steps and how we're going to move forward with the process. City officials are in the process of currently developing a project schedule for 2022. As an important next step, the city will release a request for proposal process for ARPA compliance services, which will provide necessary technical and staffing support to manage the complex ARPA requirements and execute a program that meets our collective community priorities. The city expects to release the RFP by December 17th and award the contract to a consultant team by early of 2022. As you know, in late October, City Council approved an appropriation of $5 million in ARPA funds to produce and preserve affordable housing units in City of Lancaster. City officials have begun drafting the basics of an RFP to seek affordable housing proposals that are in alignment with the city's interim housing strategy and directly advance its goals. Once the ARPA compliance consultant team is on board, that team will help to further develop and complete a housing RFP or set of RFPs as needed. The city will aim to release the housing RFP before the end of the first quarter of next year, 2022. And this lead time before the RFP release and response period after release will give time for community organizations to study the interim housing strategy, connect with partners, and prepare clear and effective proposals. So we look forward to providing regular updates each month throughout this committee, during the city committee meetings and economic development committees, to apprise the community of any project news or adjustments to any anticipated project schedule. Special thank you to the CPED team for working on this process as we start to navigate some of the guidelines for the RFP process. And we look forward to providing regular updates. Thank you.
Just to be clear, Councilor Arroyo, the consultant is being hired for the purpose of providing technical assistance to applicants.
Correct. Yep.
That's excellent. Thank you.
And with and Director Dels, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, also to help assist the city with any guidelines in managing that process and reporting as well.
That's correct. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo, and I'll extend the thanks to Jess King and to Barry Handwerger as well, our solicitor. We've been working on this over the last couple of weeks to get a handle on the schedule for 2022. We already do have a skeleton drafted. This was primarily work done by our solicitor, Barry, for the technical assistance that we'll be seeking through a consultant team. First and foremost, that will be providing legal and financial assistance to us as a city to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements of the federal ARPA program. But as this unfolds, we're going to see project proposals as well from community partners, and we'll need technical assistance in that regard as well.
Thank you. And while this is a regular update, I'm happy to hear questions from council or from the public, if there's any comment. Comments from the public?
So when would the technical assistance be available for applicants? Oh.
Maybe, Chris, you can use the table.
Sure. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yes, he said there's going to be technical assistance for applicants. And I asked, when would that be available for applicants?
So the RFP that we're talking about at the moment, the intention is to have that prepared and released by December 17th.
Okay.
To seek that firm that would assist with the compliance services. So that firm will not be assisting directly with applicants at that time.
Right.
And then the next step is to release an additional RFP or set of RFPs related to affordable housing before the end of the first quarter 2022.
So then that's when the firm would be available to help applicants? Or that's not what you meant when you said that you were going to hire a technical assistance for the applicant? Maybe you need to clarify that for me.
The firm will be providing technical assistance to the city
Right.
As we receive applications from individual applicants,
Okay.
we will need additional assistance with processing those applications.
Okay, so you're not going to provide any of the applicants with any type of technical assistance? Any of the community projects or the community partners that are applying for this money, will they get technical assistance from the city on how to apply?
Not as part of this initial RFP, but the idea that this firm will help us determine what the needs will be for the ARPA process moving ahead. So we expect that there will be a number of applicants from the community organizations.
Right.
And so we need to think through that whole process with the consultant team on board, because we don't have a team, we don't have a staff on board right now for the ARPA program. So we'll need that compliance assistance to help us make those decisions.
Okay, so once you get your help for the city in going through the technical assistance, is there going to be, I heard you said you have a council or a commission or group that's working. Is that just the solicitor and yourself, and I think you said Hamler? Or is that going to be some people representative from the community saying, okay, this is what we're asking for, what's your input? Or is that just all internal?
What we've discussed with the city council is that we'll be coordinating that process through the Economic Development Committee of City Council.
Okay.
So the idea, we haven't gotten to this yet.
Too far
but,
ahead.
But the idea is that once we have an RFP specifically for affordable housing, then we certainly would share that with the Economic Development Committee before we finalize. And after we release that plan and we get responses to the RFP, then we'd be working with the Economic Development Committee as well to help select actual proposals.
Okay, so for the affordable housing, it's going to be in the beginning of 2022. What about for the community projects and other projects that are not related to affordable housing? When do you expect those to come out? Or is that all going to be at one time because you'll have the RFP already designed, so you're only changing the use of it?
The only one we've decided on so far is the housing topic, and that will be before the target date right now is before the end of first quarter 2022. But any additional RFPs, this technical consultant would be helping us with additional RFPs, but there's no schedule yet for additional RFPs for other topics.
Okay, okay. So you'll be using this group to not just come up with a general RFP that you can use. You're going to hire these consultants and pay them to do each aspect. If you're doing affordable housing, community projects, or education, they would have to write a different RFP, and you will consult with them in writing that?
Right. One helpful way to think about it is if you think about the comprehensive plan, we didn't have staff in the city to produce a comprehensive plan. So we had to hire a consultant team that would assist us over that 2-year period. This is analogous. We'll be hiring a team to help assist us with the ARPA program. The difference is that this will be a little more legal and financial oriented because of the requirements related to ARPA. And then, as you noted, we'll probably have a series of requests for proposals for topics for community priorities over the course of 2022.
But the consultant team is not determining those priorities. Just to be clear, the consultant team is working at the direction of council and the administration based on community feedback. So I just want to be really clear about that.
Oh, okay, because I was wondering where does the community, but you are using the community feedback, where that came into play. And so we should be expecting something by January for housing.
No. December 17th
You will hire
for the compliance
consultants for the
services
city, got it?
to release. And then that firm will be assisting us with the housing RFP. We expect the release of that housing RFP to occur before the end of first quarter 2022.
For housing only?
For housing, correct.
So far.
So far, we have other decisions to make.
Okay,
but-
you know where I was going, right?
There's
But
a lot more work to do, Darlene.
I understand, I
Yep.
do understand,
Yep.
but I do also understand the RFP process, and we're hiring consultants and we're paying them, and if they're coming up with a project, it should be for the ARPA money, not each individual house community, because they're not the ones that's making them guidelines you just said. It's not gonna be that consultant firm, it's gonna be from the community, like you said, and whatever standards that we set, not the consultant firm. So I'm not quite understanding why the consultant firm's not saying, these is the legal rights, this is how you can spend this ARPA money. You gotta do A, B, C, D. Now, whether I'm spending that on housing, community projects, or education, they did their job. Now it's the group that you have to say, okay, so yes, a community project could come up at the same time housing, to actually have to stretch that out and say, okay, well, now we're paying you not just to do housing, now I'm paying you to come up with the same rules for community projects. And that didn't make sense to me. If they're gonna, if the purpose is to go over how ARPA money can be spent, that should be generic and general. This is what you can do with the ARPA money. This is how you can spend it. This is what you gotta do once you get it. You gotta meet these reporting standards, yada, 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 yada. But just to say, okay, well, we did that for housing. Now we gotta sit down and figure, how are we gonna do that for the community? It's the same thing.
I thought the exact same thing, Darlene, exactly the same. And then when you read through the guidance, the reporting requirements for each of the subrecipients varies depending on what the actual activities are. And that's the part where we need help from this this firm, to help us make sure that the reporting to the Department of Treasury, the US Department of Treasury, is on point, because if it's not, we are on the hook. And so I thought the exact same thing, like, why do we need to do this? Isn't this just boilerplate? You make it one time, we insert a different set of goals and objectives in here and go. And no, of course not. It's not that easy. So yeah, you're not mistaken in thinking that that's the way that this should roll. That would make logical sense.
Yes. Okay, and so are you giving this firm that you're hiring a timeline to come up with this process, that we hire them and say, hey, we need you to work this out and do it by such and such a time, or do they just work at it? Are we giving them a timeline? When we hire them, did we give them a timeline that we need this done by?
A timeline for the entire contract with the consulting firm?
Sure.
As far as the housing piece of it, it should be by the end of the first quarter.
Okay,
So
and
end of
then for the
March
rest
of
of the other
2022.
pieces is when, or we're not setting that yet?
Not determined yet.
I have a little question that came up, and it's to this gentleman. The firm that we hired.
Sir, if you want to come up to the podium.
Yes, my name is Ivan Acosta Velez, and you know my name. Question for you. This firm, do they have minorities in it? That no, because we have all these firms that we're getting to tell us what to do, and some of them don't. And that makes a difference. That's a part of the pie, the apple pie.
Mr. Acosta, we haven't hired a firm yet. We're only issuing the RFP by December the
But he's
17th.
telling about the RP, who's issued, you're getting a firm, you're saying, to make an RP.
We understand. We have made a very intentional effort to hire women-owned, minority-owned business and to subcontract to them. And that is part of our appraisal process. And so we will be issuing the RFP on December the 17th. We have not made any hiring decisions yet, and I do appreciate that you're elevating equity and diversity in the conversation.
Well, Mayor, with due respect, I live it. I see it every day. When I go places, they look at you different than the way they look at me. So I'm gonna stand here and say it.
Yes.
You might not like it, but they see us different. And that's what I'm asking, that you guys get people that see our city the way it's supposed to be, okay? If you're gonna make these RPs or GRPs or whatever you wanna call them, that they touch our community. Because a lot of money comes here and it's not touching a lot of our community. okay, with due respect. And now we have council that is respecting the community. You know what? As they say in Puerto Rico, huepa, let's do something about it, okay? Because we can talk very beautiful, but I'm gonna be very honest, I don't see it, okay? We see a little thing here and a little thing there, but I don't see it, Mayor, with due respect, okay? And we can sit down and I'll point out what I'm talking about, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta. Any other questions from the public? Great. Well, thank you, Director Dels, for the clarification, and looking forward to the issuing of the RFP and moving this forward because it is a very big deal. So thank you. That is all, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Okay, that brings us, I believe, to the Committee of the Whole, where we have two resolutions that I have added to the committee agenda. Council Resolution number 59, 2021 is simply a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and white nationalism and affirming our solidarity with our Jewish community members. It has been sort of a roller coaster week last week, but I think Lancaster showed a lot of support as we found increasing news updates, and we found what we found is that the conversation that was created resulted in condemnations of white nationalism and white supremacy and anti-Semitism, which we found were organizing political parties as nearby as Lancaster Township from all over the political spectrum. And I know many members of council have spoken so individually, and I felt this resolution was our opportunity to say so as an entire council. And so I will hear a motion, if a council member would be willing, to add this to next Tuesday's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. That's kind of my pitch, so council comments, questions?
Council President. Thank you. I appreciate you putting this on our agenda, and I don't think that the fact that the damage to the menorah seems to be very unintentional should diminish the importance of this resolution. It was really great to go out last week each night of Hanukkah and see so many members of our community there. And I think that it speaks to the character of the city of Lancaster. But as you mentioned, there are those who threaten the safety of our neighbors and friends all around. And so we cannot forget that. And I think this shines an important light on that and makes it a bold statement that we stand against that.
Thank you, Councilor Baquet. Any other council comments? From the public?
I just really want to be in support of it. I know NAN, the National Action Network, is really looking at organized behind the white nationalist group that was in Millersville and the letters that were put out. And I'm glad to hear that council made comments, because personally, I didn't hear that and see that. So to see that this is coming forth, that is good, because it is something that we're very concerned about. We're not taking it lightly, and know that this happened and we're not doing nothing. We are really organizing behind what has happened in the county. Thank you.
That's much appreciated. And I will point out, as history repeats itself in remarkably unfortunate ways, much of the gains made during the civil rights movement were created in solidarity between African American, Latino, and Jewish organizations. So it's nice to see history repeating itself in that way as well. I'm presuming there are no other comments from the public on this issue, but I'm happy to be wrong. All right, hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Yes,
Or
Mr. President.
I can just do, yep.
Do you want to do a roll call vote, or do you want it by affirmation?
I'll do it by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That then moves us to Council Resolution number 60, 2021. This is just an opportunity to recognize and memorialize former councilors who have passed away, John Lyons and Anthony Zygmunt, and their work in bringing us to where we are as a city. I mentioned this at the top of a previous council meeting, and it's been mentioned in this meeting explicitly that we have a long way to go as a city, but I think as many councilors up here who do statewide work know, the outcomes that we see both socially and fiscally in the city of Lancaster make us really grateful when we look at many of the other third-class cities in the Commonwealth. And so we often talk about what staff have done, but our predecessors on council have gotten us to the point where we can make the necessary changes for our community, and as such, I think that their work and life should be recognized. And I presume that you all agree with me. Blah, 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 blah. I will hear a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Council comments. From the public.
I have to make a comment. Mr. Lyons helped a lot of the Latinos when I was in the Puerto Rican parade president, because I'm Puerto Rican and proud of it, okay? And he helped us a lot. He really was there for us. There was a lot of times people would shut us down, but we would call Mr. Lyons and he said, I'm here. And the only thing he said in Spanish, hola, but he said something. Thank you for recognizing.
Thank you.
I'll just add that I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Lyons on the Planning Commission for about 5 years, and he was a real asset on the Planning Commission. I really appreciated his commentary. He was fiercely dedicated to the city of Lancaster and furthering its success, and really appreciated getting to know him. So thank you very much, councilors, for putting this on the agenda. It's well-deserved, certainly, by both of the former councilors.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Were you?
Yes.
Please.
Mr. President, I wanted to go back and reopen Personnel Committee. It's real quick.
Oh, yes, give me just a second. I see. I need to take a vote on the other thing.
Right.
So my apologies. Hearing nothing else, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Yes, Councilor Diaz.
So I wanted to basically say that per Robert's rule, I need to move forward the full 13 that are going to be moved to the 14th. The committee as a whole, I wanted to see that you all agree.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, that was it.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz.
I'm sorry, Councilor Diaz, was there a specific one that was on?
All 13, she said.
All
Okay.
13.
Well, we did that individually.
Yes, we did, but I think Counselor Soto didn't hear it, so I wanted to make sure that I made the claim.
So, okay, yes. Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Diaz. I think with that being everything, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Unless you want to.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.